Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining the 5th GlenAllachie live event. Today should have been the second day of Spirit of Speyside Festival. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, it had to be cancelled. But it is a festival which happens every year, and it celebrates the best of Speyside and its 51 distilleries. So we're usually very busy welcoming people from all over the world and showing them around our fantastic distillery. We should also tomorrow have celebrated the first anniversary of our visitor center, opened for the Spirit of Speyside 2019. So unfortunately, you can't make it to us. So we decided to bring the distillery to you. So the way it's going to work tonight is we're going to show you a video as 5 short clips which show each step of the whiskey making process. And Richard, next to me, Richard will explain the process of each step. And after each clip, we will stop and we can answer your question. Now, we will answer as many questions as possible. We'll try to go through all of them, but it's very, very difficult. We usually have more questions that we can answer. But if we can't answer your question, we'll try to answer afterwards by message. So today is not a pure whiskey tasting. However, we like to be relaxed. We like to make the evening pleasant. So I would advise you pour yourself a generous dram of GlenAllachie if you have, and then we will talk you through the film. So Richard, welcome. What are you drinking?
Well, I'm really fortunate, Juliette. I have taken the opportunity tonight because it's a little bit special. It is the night before the anniversary of the visitor centre. I thought I'd try the 1989 distillery exclusive. It's not often that I take this as a dram, but I really do look forward to trying it. Even look at the colour, that rich mahogany that we know it has.
I can't believe you have access to that.
Have
you got the keys to the distillery then?
I have the keys to the distillery, but not so much to the shop. But before we shut, unfortunately for the pandemic, I'd bought a bottle. So I thought, do you know what? You have to actually celebrate with something a little bit special. So it's that rich mahogany colour, that heather honey on the nose, the dark chocolate and toffee. There's so much a part of the GlenAllachie range, but it's so important and just something special to celebrate some time on the actual chat with you and obviously everybody else out there. So welcome, enjoy.
Good. Well, I went a bit more modest, I would say. I've picked the 10-year-old cask strength. Now I could have said, you know, I've picked it because it's been voted the best single malt Scotch whisky of the year by the World Whisky Award. I could talk you through the fantastic aromas, the chocolate, the raisins, the eucalyptus. But you know what? The reason I chose it is because every time I nose it and every time I taste it, it just put a smile on my face. And that's all you have to ask for whiskey. Just make yourself happy and relax. So on this note, I think we're ready for a bit of a virtual tour.
Yeah, I think we should start the tour. Let's start to see what's happening. So obviously starting with the milling process, which is really the front, the first part that we come to. We buy the malted barley locally. It's all Scottish barley produced as near to the distillery as we possibly can manage. Here you can see the Porteous mill, that nice colour that it is. Built in 1967 in Leeds, brought up to the distillery. It's the original one, as we say. We've never changed it, and it works an absolute dream. You can see the wooden conveyors and elevators and the box around the weir so that we can actually confirm with HMRC, our customs and excise, exactly how much malt we're using, and keeping a track on the efficiency of the distillery. This bit's a little bit important, as I say. The more efficient the distillery is trying to become, the more important it is to monitor what you're doing in the mashing or the mashing process. But that's predominantly driven by the malt that we get and how we mill it as well. As I say, we're using a couple of varieties at the moment, Concerto and Diablo. Concerto is really coming to the end of its natural life, and we're moving on to Diablo, which will be the first that we start up. When we start after the brief silent period we've had now, we've moved on to Diablo and peated malt. So looking forward to that and start up in the next few weeks, hopefully, all things being acceptable and all the social distancing places being in place. So any questions, Juliette?
You can breathe now. That was quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got a question myself, actually. You mentioned Porteus, and I know most of the people looking at the name down the list have been here or visited distilleries, but can you tell us the story about Porteus? Because most distilleries would have a Porteus mill.
Yeah, I think there's a unfortunate story really here that Porteus were a fantastic manufacturer. You saw a little bit of the bearings. There's 4 rollers and a beater in the middle. They work in tandem, slightly off kilter, so they actually tear a little bit of the malt. The first set of rollers are removing the grist, removing the husk. The next set of rollers are actually producing a bit more flour, so the ratio that we need when we're actually mashing. But Porteus made a fantastic bit of equipment. It was really rock solid, well built. And what happened? People bought them, installed them. They needed very little maintenance. They needed very little spares and repairs. And unfortunately for that, they went out of business. And it's been an unfortunate situation. And many distilleries that are newly starting now are getting reconditioned Porteus mills and working with them because they were just so good. They were used predominantly in distilling and brewing and did a fantastic job. So unfortunately, it's almost a tragedy when you build something so good that lasts for so many years and your company goes under. It's a shame. But we're very lucky. We've got one and it works well for us. You know,
I think the moral of the story is never be flawless. You always have to have a bit of something. Yeah,
yeah,
something.
a little bit of a quirk. Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I think.
So I'm just looking at the name joining us tonight. So you still have, a very familiar names, Michelle and Duncan, and there's Max coming, Colin, a lot of people, Philip Dixon again, Jeremy Watt. I mean, a lot of people who know personally and who would have come to see us on this occasion. There's also quite a lot of new names, which is really, really good. So I've got Radek from Poland. Sorry, Radek, I can't pronounce your second names. We also have Brenda Cooper.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that? Can I pick up on that? And Brenda's pointing out that Dennis, one of the guys that was at the distillery when I first started there, just at exactly the point we took it over, started work at the distillery in 1999. So I should say a big thank you to Dennis because he was involved in making such a fantastic dram when he started work. And I'm sure he enjoyed all of the years he was at the distillery. So shout out to Dennis.
Well, thank you for that.
Cheers.
Can you tell us as well, Richard? I thought I forgot your name for a minute. Can you tell us the proportions, of the grist?
Yeah. So I touched on that a little bit. The standard proportions that everybody would use, it would be 30% husk that allows the drainage, the 60% grits that isn't too floury and too much powder, and the 10% of flour, which if you have a too high a portion, almost acts like a glue and binds everything, and it makes it very difficult for you to drain in the actual mash tun when you come to that part of the process. So what we actually have to do is measure and monitor all the time. And you didn't actually catch it in that clip, but we monitor each milling, we take a little sample, we put it through a sieve box and check it. And for us, that's really important. But over the years, we found we can tweak the actual portion. The mash tun that we've got in allows us a little bit of flexibility. And if we can grind slightly harder, bring the level of flour up, it allows us to just make it slightly easier to extract all the extra sugars or all the carbohydrate for the actual yeast to use later on. So at the moment, we're not quite 30, 60, 10. We're probably more like 14% flour and a little bit like 27% husk and 59% grits. And that's where we are at the moment.
Okay. So what happened next then? We've got the grist.
Yeah, I got the grist.
Mashing.
Yeah, we've done 9.4 tons of grist, and we've put it into the mash into the grist hopper, which sits nicely above the mashing process. So let's move into the mashing process now. Here we go. You can just see the grist hopper, where, as I say, the 9.4 tons of malted barley that's been ground has been filled in, and then we moved into the mash tun. This is a semi-lauter mash tun. It's 9.4 tons, but it's 6.1 meters in diameter. It's semi-lauter. You can see the rakes that cut through the bed and allow the drainage. You can see the sparge nozzles just at the top of the picture, which allow us to rinse any of the remaining sugar out of the bed as well. We run with we run with 4 waters. The first water going through the grist, mixing with the grist through the mashing machine, and then going into the lauter tun, a semi-lauter tun, and then we drain that through the sieve at the bottom, through the underback and into the fermentation. The second and third and fourth waters all go through the nozzle that you see in the middle of the picture there. And there's a ring of these, and that's just like rinsing a tea bag out almost, getting as much extract as we can and allowing it to even spread over the bed of ground up malted barley. And then that goes through there, you can see into the underback and through to the process.
Yeah, so we'll see the next process after. Is that the original mash tun?
No, the original mash tun is what I like to call a rumble and grunt. It was the old-fashioned style with the arms that rotated over and disrupted the bed. And predominantly people used to spend time just putting the water in through the mashing machine all the time. So they would just flood on top, drain through. And really one of the advances in the mashing process and the technology, and you continue to see that now, there's a continuous movement where things are moving forward. They moved into that. So yeah, about 25 years after production started, so 1992 or 93, maybe Dennis will answer that one actually. They replaced it with a semi-lauter. It's easier to clean. It's slightly more efficient. It allows a better extract. Those knives that cut through allow us a sort of more constant drain. And as I say, the sparge on top allows us to just rinse the sugars out of the bed and take the strength down. Where what we're trying to do is get as much extract as possible at this point. We always say in mashing and milling is how efficient your distillery will be as you go further down the process. It's about how much flavor you can add into it as well.
Well, that's where you extract the sugar, and we do want sugar.
Yeah.
So going back to our viewers here, we have a couple of questions, not especially about the process, but more about the releases. So the first question is about the wood finishes. We have done a batch 1 last year in July, and we've just launched batch 2 this year in, well, March, April. It was a bit of a difficult time. Is it an annual release?
Yes, but I think that's maybe a better one for you to answer, because obviously that's more in the sales side of things. But yeah, no, we're anticipating, and I'm sure the marketing team would reiterate all of this, that basically we'll be looking at a different group of wood finishes every year, spending a little bit of time. Billy will be doing some sampling to ensure that the different batches that we have present a really interesting prospect for anybody who's going to try them. So, but you'll, I'm sure, have something to say about the wood finishes.
Oh, they're just fantastic, and I can't wait for batch 3. But I loved all of them. I've got a sweet spot, I must admit, for the rye finish. But it's a question of taste. But I just like the spiciness coming through. So we'll see. But yeah, if you have the opportunity to find one in your market, do that, and also keep up. Have a look on the Facebook page. But on the 7th of May, Billy himself will do a tasting about the 3 new wood finishes. So if you can grab yourself a bottle and join us on the 7th of May. Another question from Max Foxon about the peated run. So we do some peated whiskey. We have some peated malts.
McNair's is the range at the moment, but for us, yeah, we're very fortunate that, to my knowledge, the first of the peated production that the distillery had done was something that the team were really keen on. We thought it was a really good opportunity. And I touched on it the last time I was speaking to you guys on the video link. We worked really hard to get the actual peat expression. So this is now going to be the 3rd tranche of peated production. and we're trying something a little bit different. Every time we're trying something a little bit different, it will be and is always obviously going to be heavy peated that we try and put through the process. And then we're working to try and get it matched up with the best woods that you could possibly find, spending a little bit of time, sometimes using virgin wood, sometimes using standard American barrels, just to give it that best chance to come to the market as early as possible. I know that some of the guys in sales are really keen to do something with it sooner rather than later, but it's really a question of just letting it just carry on that maturation process and mellow. So something definitely to look forward to.
Yeah.
And it will be a heavy peat that you'll notice.
Yeah, so it's should be coming in 18 months to years time, maybe a bit sooner, but we will launch it or release it when it's ready. So another question from Philip Dixon. What wood finishes might we see in the future? And I can answer this one, I think, is when I read the question, I thought about an expression in English, which is, how long is a piece of string? So that would be my answer. There will be a lot of different wood finishes. We are very keen to experiment, to try new type of wine and, bourbon, rye, masala, Madeira. It's mind blowing when you actually come to the distillery to see all these different cask type.
We're spending a lot of time, Juliette, as you say. We look around the world to see what wood is out there and what wood might actually work really well with the whiskies that we're producing. As we'll talk a little bit later on, we have quite a rich, robust spirit. It's not typically Speyside. It's a little bit heavier. It's a little bit more complicated. It's got some more heavier esters in it, and we're trying to introduce that. And that in itself will be interesting to marry with different woods, and that's really the skill of that master blender of ours, Mr. Walker or Billy, getting involved in that and just saying, "Yep, this wood has this character. Let's have a go at it with this." So yeah, looking forward to all of these wood finishes. So
I think, the reason Billy purchased GlenAllachie is because of the rich spirit, and because Billy likes this heavy wine notes and sweet notes. So they both go hand in hand. I've got another question for you. And funny enough, sorry, but this one comes from my son who's watching on the other side. And he says, "Let's see the trousers, Richard."
So I have to say,
well done.
I've been to a few events over the years, and I've thoroughly enjoyed turning up with a little bit of Scottish twist to it. Put the red tartan trousers, Stuart tartan, which is my mother's clan side, and I think they are just spectacular. I've been to a lot of events. It's a little bit of a signature thing. I'm going to try changing it soon, but they're good. You can't go wrong with something that's a classic.
Yeah, no, they're very distinguished. It's really good. I've put my own bit of tartan. You can't quite see, but I've got my Buchan tartan.
Oh, very good. Yeah, very nice.
So because of the spirit of Speyside, usually it's wear a touch of tartan, and we thought let's do it tonight. Okay. Again, shall we just go on the next?
Yeah, let's go on to the next part of the process. Let's go into the fermentation area. So 6 stainless steel lined fermentation vessels. They're the original ones that were put in. So they're stainless steel lined inside, which is really good for us. The stainless steel tends to work really well, gives us a chance to clean easy. And what you're seeing here is actually washback that's just being filled. So this is in the middle of the process. So this is coming out of the mash tun. It's taking about 2.5 hours for the liquid to come out of the mash tun, along mixed with the yeast to begin with, and then going into the fermentation vessel. And that'll slowly rise, and we'll end up with 42,500 litres of sweet wort that we see there that will start to ferment, and we'll look to ferment it. And if I remember rightly, what we'll hopefully see next is in the best Blue Peter tradition one I did earlier. Here's a mash that's 24 hours further on. So it's a little bit further in the process. You can start to see that vigorous fermentation kicking off. There's a little bit of a lag in the fermentation as the yeast gets used to its surrounding, and then it starts to ferment, and it converts those lovely sugars that we've extracted into alcohol and flavor compounds, congeners, that we're looking to do. And so you can see it there. It's just beginning to pick up. It's just beginning to get a little bit more volatile for the fermentation as all of those sugars are converted. And then if we go into the next fermentation vessel, which we're going to have a little look at now, you'll see it's even further forward. The fermentation is almost over. Most of the fermentations occur after 24 hours to 30 hours. And then you see it a little bit dies back as there's less sugar available. And really, we've converted as much of that into alcohol as we can. What's a little bit different for us is we tend to then go on and leave it to sit for another number of days. So we do a fermentation that lasts 160 hours, and that's really to capture as much flavor as we possibly can. We're always looking to ensure there's no contamination and no issues with that. So what we're trying to do here is actually clean it as clean as we can. Stainless steel, really good. Wooden washbacks are slightly harder to work with in that occurrence. And then we actually do that, leave it to ferment for that long. And we're just nuancing it, just trying to get as much flavor as possible, because that's where we can then distill it up, concentrate those flavors, and then send them down to maturation. And here you can see the inside the stainless steel. You can see the switcher, which beats down the foam. And also you just caught a little glimpse of the spray ball that ensures it's clean. As I say, pumping through in about 2.5 hours, and then basically adding 250 mils of liquid yeast, which is what distilleries use now. They used to, many years ago, use brewing yeast, and then they started to use pressed or bagged yeast. But we started to move on to the liquid yeast because there's a little bit less chance of any contaminant coming in the process that way as well. And we haven't talked about it at that point, but we will be looking to do some different yeast soon. We've just been trying to balance the process over the last couple of years. So the next project, let's look at some extra different types of fermentation, add a little bit of different characteristic, a little bit of different direction, and then give that to Billy to work with in different woods and see how they go.
Good, good. Very lots of details in this. Now you're talking 160 hours. So
Yeah.
am I right in thinking this is the longest in any distilleries?
To my knowledge, yes. It's normal for distilleries. And when the distillery was running a little bit busier, the distillery was capable of 4.4 million. It would have had much shorter fermentations. And when they were running at a slightly lower rate, they would have a longs and shorts, typically 56 hours, maybe up to 90, 96 hours. But we've really taken this opportunity to say, let's slow things down. Let's give it a chance to give as much extra flavor. And we're just trying to nuance the spirit we're producing. We're just trying to give it a little bit of extra character. And so giving it that extra time. And I think it's something that we can do because of the layout of the distillery. A short run from the Mash Tun into the fermentation area, easy to clean, good pipe work, and low chance of contamination. And you want good secondary fermentation from wild microorganisms like the wild yeast that would be present on the malted barley, but you don't want too much of that. And we're fortunate, we check at the end the pH and the acidity, and always knows it as well. So we're always making sure we don't have a contamination. If you had wooden washbacks, might not be so easy. So we're just fortunate we've got a really nice layout to play on that side of things as well.
So one of the questions actually was, are we losing anything not using pine washback? But in what you're saying, in a way, we're gaining flexibility in being able to ferment a bit longer than usual.
Yeah,
a lot longer.
Yeah, I would say so. What we're doing is giving an opportunity to develop in a different way. The pine ones are nice, good, or the wooden washbacks are good because they do have this sort of natural microflora they inoculate in. But we get that natural microflora from the earlier part of the process that knocks in, and it just allows us to just look longer. Yeah, I mean, I think wooden washbacks are interesting, but you have to be a little bit more careful because they're harder to control. You have to ensure you clean them to higher standard, not higher standard. They're harder to clean, but you still can do it. So yeah, they just add an extra degree of complexity, but nothing that we would need in our distillery. I think we've got something that just works really well.
Yeah. So we have a question from Brett Silverstein. Are we using any special yeast? You mentioned we're using Kerry yeast. It's liquid yeast. It's not really special. I mean, it's not...
It's standard distilling yeast. It's been developed over years. It's been selected to have a tolerance for the alcohol levels that we go to, because typically it can be 8.5. Some distilleries go even higher, but not for us. So it's been developed in that way. We know the balance of flavors that it produces is good. And that's really important as well. When you start looking at different yeasts, you can have problems that maybe they're slightly higher of one congener or another, or maybe they just don't produce a nice balance of congeners at all. So yeah, we're trusting in that standard distilling yeast, but we will. He's right. We'll be looking at new novel varieties. I've been spending some time, and our actual plan was during this month we would have been doing some work on new variety yeast. We would have been adding some dried yeast as a different sort of method of fermentation, and we would have actually been also looking at just different varieties, slightly different varieties, to see if we could introduce different characters. So yeah, next year we can talk about it. When you come this time next year, you'll see and visit the distillery, which hopefully it'll all be back up. Then people will be able to talk about that, and we'll be able to have a discussion about the impact those different yeasts had. So looking forward to it.
Good. Now I've got a question from Joan Bruce. So hi, Joan. Thank you for joining us. Joan is an ex-colleague of mine and a good friend, and she's asking you a question. What is the most experimental dram you've produced?
God, that's really different. I suppose I'm going to talk about the new make side of things and the production side, and just say that we did a lot of work last year and the year before on the peated production, so we could have a little bit of fun on that one. Again, it was a conversation that really Billy started and said, look, how can we really maximize some of these these phenols and glycols and thiols that we're talking about? How can we get as many of them into a dram as possible? So we had a little look, and we did a little bit of experiment through the distillation process, and ultimately came up with something that we think will be very interesting. I'm not going to spend much more time on that, because I'm not sure exactly how much we should be talking about that, but we did some work to get as much as we could out of there, and to get a really heavy peated spirit out.
A very heavy peated spirit, also coming from quite a heavy peated malt, because we start at around 80 ppm. But it's how you can extract even more phenols from that. So watch the space. It's very interesting. So thank you very much for all your questions. I mean, we had just another light nice question about the hand. Whose hand is it opening the washbacks? So we had a discussion.
Is it not yours?
It wasn't mine, but you thought it was mine, and we had to look closely. Somebody thought it was Karen's, but actually it's a man's hand. Or so we think anyway. So it should be Mike. So sorry, Mike, to say, if you are watching, you have a ladylike hand. So it is Mike's hand.
Wait for the bad comment coming soon.
I'm not sure he is watching, but so Mike is one of the two distillers. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's it for the question round here. Oh no, where did you source the peat? That's quite a good question as well. And Mike says, yeah, it is my hand.
Yeah, to be fair, we should acknowledge that he did a really good job. I think it was him that was involved in the filming of the visit around the distillery, and it's worked really well. So we should have had a better idea that it was his. But no, the peat comes from St Fergus at the moment. I went across and had a little look at the peat field just outside Peterhead. Funny name for it in a way, just up above Aberdeen. We spoke to the guys that produce it there. We want a quite damp peat that's been extracted fairly recently, and then it goes to our local maltster, who has a new peat kiln to try and maximize the amount of peat reek that he can produce without getting burned through and all of these things. So yeah, but we have had a little bit of success trying peats from other parts of Scotland. And that's some more work that we're going to do. There's a peat field on the other side of Benrinnes that was open for many years, and unfortunately it's closed now. But we're trying to investigate whether we can get a sample of that and see if it's possible to reopen a seam, take a little bit of peat out of that, and try it from such a close proximity, and also so far from the sea. So obviously with a slightly different balance of phenol characters, which would be really interesting for us to look at.
Good. So a very interesting question for that. Thank you very much. Now, we have seen 3 steps of the whiskey making process. We've gone through the milling, we've gone through the mashing to extract all the sugar, the fermenting, where you transform the sugar into alcohol. But at the end of the fermentation, we only have a strong beer. Now, we're not in Belgium. Yeah, we do beer, but
we have a lot of Belgian colleagues that come to visit us regularly, and it's always a pleasure when they come, and even more of a pleasure when they bring some nice Belgian beer. So we're kind of missing that at the moment, because there would have been several people across that would have been fantastic to see, who would have brought some lovely beer. But you're right, we need to take that to the next level.
So what's the next level then?
So let's go into distillation. So hopefully now we can fire up that, and you can see our lovely 2 sets of wash and spirit stills as we walk through the process. So a great picture. You see wash stills in the foreground, spirit stills in the background. You can just see it there. They're stocky. They're big. They're bold. They're large stills. They've got lots of capacity. The wash stills 36,500 liters capacity, total capacity, and the spirit still is approximately 24,500 liters capacity. Really quite big, thick neck across. Standard lye pipe, and you can see here the 2 sets of safes, because originally when the distillery was produced, there was a line, or it was split down the middle, and you could run each side separately. In fact, when the distillery started up, it actually started on the right side for the first 6 months before they even felt the need to move into the left side to actually start production. And you can see that we still retain the spirit stave, where we can see it's running into the faints there at the moment, and the low wines is producing as well, and the same there. So I think when this was probably filmed, we'd finished the actual spirit run and the 4 shots, and we were just going on to the faints, running into the blue receivers that you see either side. And then when we get enough ready, we can do the next batch as well. I'm kind of glossing over the process. I'm sure everybody knows we take the first distillation of the wash still, concentrate it up from the 8 or 9% up to about 20-odd%. We mix it in with the previous heads and tails from the last distillation. Then we put it into the spirit still and distill it. And it takes about 7 hours. You get a lovely clip down at the warehouse for anybody who's interested there. And this is quite interesting, because what you see here is really good. And we'll pause it if we can. I hope it's paused. You can actually see one of the main differences in our distillery and many of the other distilleries that you'll go around is we don't have vertical condensers. We've got horizontal condensers. And this is really sort of an ode to the original designer. He'd actually spent a little bit of time seeing where he could save energy. And even in 1967, energy saving and being conscious of how much energy used was important. So by changing the layout of the condenser, the vapor comes up, boils up through the neck. Some of it refluxes, as we always talk about, and then some of it makes its way across and gets into the condenser, and from the condenser then runs into the safe. But while it's doing that, we're doing it at a high level, so we can then fill it into a vat, so we could then fill the second distillation just with gravity, and we could save energy. And the same was done for the spirit still. We'd do the same thing. We'd run the spirit still, we'd fill it, we'd get the 4 shots, then we'd collect the spirit, and then obviously that would go through into the spirit store. And there was 2 large wooden vessels, spirit vats, that were held through there, and we would fill directly from the spirit vat through a flow meter. And it was the first distillery to do flow using flow meters to fill casks. And they would use that by gravity as well. So there's no pumping. So we were saving energy from that point through the process. Really clever idea. And it was something that he'd obviously seen in the brewing sector. Now for us, it's given us a little bit of an extra tweak. It actually gives us a little bit more flexibility, I feel, on how we run these condensers. So you can either run them hot and get a little bit more ester, or you can run them cold and get a little bit more heavy characteristics, more of the sort of less fruity and more complex, deeper characters as well. So anyway, that's the distillation process. A lovely still house, 4 magnificent stills. They really are big, bold, brash, and they help to lead us to that really nice, heavier spirit that we talk about, that we produce.
Yeah, indeed. Magnificent, and also, I would say, very, very clean. I mean, I've visited a fair amount of distilleries as well, and I've never seen such a clean distillery. So credit to the 2 distillers, Mike and Philip, who really look after the stills and the rest of the distillery. They're very proud of where they they work and what they do. So well done to you. Few questions. Well, you've answered kind of this one about what difference
if
you make with the vertical condenser, and this one is from Don Dimi. So Dimitri, nice to have you here from Belgium.
Yeah, it is nice. It's just slightly different, the way the action of the vapor condensing then running down the tube. It's almost, I don't know, there's a sort of set of plates that move it around, but it's a little bit quicker in an old traditional vertical condenser, whereas the horizontal, it spends a little bit more time getting across. And we have subcoolers at the end of that. So we've actually got two distinct parts to that condensing process. We've got, both of them are horizontal. The first one, obviously, taking that extra energy that you get when you're taking a vapor to a liquid, and it drives some of the catalytic activity and changing the character of the spirit using the copper as the catalyst. It goes through there, comes to a liquid, and at that point, and then goes a little subcooler at the end of it, which helps to take that down and keep those characters so they don't lose them, because obviously it's still warm. So it goes through and we take it down to a much cooler temperature, as cool as we can. So that's really where we're fortunate with these. They're really nice little feature. And I know there's a couple of others in Scotland, but I think it's just something that's a little bit different from the norm, which helps us get that heavy character.
Well, I believe there's not many distilleries who have horizontal condensers, and the only ones would be the ones that William Delme Evans has designed, or some of them. Yeah. So Macduff has got some of them, but not all. Is that right?
I think all the Macduff ones, from memory, from being in the still house just a little while ago, I think they all were that way. I'm wondering, and it's out there, I'm wondering with Tilly Barden as well, perhaps might have that. I'm pretty sure one of the other distilleries that Delme Evans was involved in Jura doesn't have them. I'm sure they've got vertical, but I may be corrected by somebody later, I'm sure.
Yeah. Good. Do they have nicknames, our stills? And fair enough, a lot of distilleries have nicknames, but I don't think they do.
No, we need
to think about this one.
Maybe it's something we should do, is look to put nicknames on them. No, it's not something that we've ever thought about doing. But no, it's quite an interesting one. Maybe we could ask everybody out there to come up with some nice nicknames, knowing the history that we have at GlenAllachie, knowing what we're about. Maybe they could come up with something that's quite appropriate for all four of them, the two spirit and the two wash. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, that would be, So the challenge is out there. So we talked about the distillation. So I don't know if you have managed to get, no, a bit of new spirit, just to nose, but you haven't. You've got a short memory. So I have my little sample to nose.
I do have it, but it's not by me. It's in the other room. So it would look rude of me to just get going and go that way. So maybe I'll try. I'll do it, and I can't do it when the film's on. So
yeah,
so I'll have to.
I've got it here, and I'll try to describe it as best as I can. But it's a lot of sweetness for me, a bit of maltiness, and I get quite a lot of pear. It's kind of pear, poire William, and a bit of butterscotch and a bit of eucalyptus as well. Yeah, so it's well balanced.
I see quite a lot of heavier notes, and there's a nice balance of cereal in there as well. There's a nice balance of the sort of wax, the sort of heather honey sort of aspect on the comb, that sort of idea that we would talk about in the final spirit. There's even a little bit, I think, a little bit of banana is quite often in there as well. It's quite rich, a quite complex ester, slightly harder to achieve sometimes, and less of the pear drop sort of light fruity esteries, more of the heavier ones that we talk about as well. Maybe some polished leather as well that you would talk about in the finished spirit, giving you a chance there as well. I'm doing that from memory, but I have nosed it a lot, so I'm fairly comfortable with that.
And what is the still strength?
So
at the end of the run, what would it be?
Normally, coming off the run, we're coming off about 69.6%. Little bit of flexibility, summer and winter, but invariably that. And more recently, we've done a little bit of work of just dropping that final cut point in the spirit run, which is actually seeing us take the average spirit strength down. We're just trying to capture a few of those extra congeners and trying to do a little bit of work to just add, again, a little bit of balance and a little bit of extra length to that flavor profile that we're producing there as well. So a little bit of project work that we were doing that's just actually coming to an end, and we're going to look to do something with yeast next. So constantly looking, just little tweaks, little finesses to what we're actually doing in the production to see how we go.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I mean, I think for me, still need the 3 years at least in wood, or even longer. So I will change my glass and go back to the 10-year-old.
I could have gone. Here's one I produced earlier, but unfortunately it's water. So
yeah, I think that's softer. It's more, well, obviously mature, smoother, different notes. It's lovely. So we've got the spirit. Now we would fill it into cask. That would really be the next step. So we don't have any footage of the filling store, but maybe you can tell us a bit more about the filling store and how it came about, because if I'm right, under Pernod Ricard, they didn't have a filling store. That's something we had to add.
So yeah, over the years, and let's run the VT. It's not actually the filling store, but it's the warehouse section. But we can speak about the filling store as we're running that as well. So yeah, just a process, larger company centralizing a facility. So what they do is they take the spirit off site and they would fill it in wood in a larger facility. We needed that. And we'll come back to exactly what we did. But it's absolutely fantastic little view of typical warehousing for us. We've got 16 warehouses, numbered to 17 because the first warehouse was actually stopped being used as a warehouse, but we've just carried on the numbering system. And here you can see us filling a punch in and putting it into the warehouse. Putting it into place and leaving it to rest for 7-8 years. So absolutely amazing place. We have 100,000 casks, almost 100,000 casks, predominantly in that sort of warehouse. We've 2 small dunnage warehouses which we put in. They weren't actually used, but we do an awful lot of work, as you've touched on earlier, on different wood styles. So we felt, while we can put the wood in different warehouses, it's actually giving us a chance to collect some of each individual batch so we can sample and nose and review and assess the process that it's going through and how it's maturing and how you take it, but also give people a chance to see it when they come and visit us in one area, because it's difficult to go around the whole warehouse complex and see things. You're right. We were talking about the spirit store, or the filling store. Originally, as I said, the filling store was built at the time of the original construction, was just associated right next to the actual the stills, and it was gravity fed. It was really interesting little way of producing a filling store. But over time, they realized the production capacity they were in, it was actually better to take the filling store, and they moved the filling store actually down to in between warehouses 4 and 3. And they put the section in there, and they ran it for a little while, and then Chivas decided they didn't need it, or Pernod in their day, I think, decided they didn't need it. But clearly, when you take a distillery back, you need it to do all the functions. So we spend a little bit of time. We put a pipe that takes the spirit from the spirit store, which is where the old filling store is now, down about 500-600 meters down to the warehousing complex where we store the new make spirit, and then we put in a new filling head. We put in new vats so we could do revatting and reworking of the aged spirit. I'm not going to spend much time talking about that because I really think that that's a whole evening's entertainment, and I know they'll be planning to do something special about that in a few weeks' time, I'm sure. So that'll be something a little bit special, where you'll hear a little bit more about the different types of wood. You'll hear a little bit more about, us vatting and how we go about that vatting process, how we go about selecting the different casks and how we'll put them into the vats and then choosing the different casks. I can say today the guys were busy filling port, filling export wood today. So they're working really hard on that. In fact, port hogsheads, because normally it's a port pipe, but we're very fortunate that we've actually been able to get hold of some port hogsheads and just see the impact that slightly smaller cask will have on the spirit. So yeah, busy day to day for everybody on the distillery. We're still running just as a sort of skeleton crew in warehousing. We did a little shutdown a few weeks ago in exactly the same manner as we would do for a summer or winter shutdown, takes things down safely and put all the prep work into keeping the distillery as safe as it can, turning everything down and keeping it clean and tidy for when we actually come to restart in a few weeks' time, hopefully.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
So a lot of question. I think the warehouses is always the part which intrigue people, and I believe personally that's where the magic happens. The beginning of the process is very, very important, but I suppose everything can be controlled. The warehouse, it's a bit more about Mother Nature. You can select the best cask, you can do everything into your control, but Mother Nature plays a part, and you never quite know, in my opinion, what you get at the end, because each cask is different. So that's the intriguing part about how you mature the whiskey. So a couple of questions. There was what is the difference between maturation in a racked warehouse and in a dunnage warehouse? Would it mature differently?
There's obviously always a slight difference in each of these, and predominantly the original distilleries used to use a dunnage warehouse. They tend to be a low room, damp atmosphere, earthen floor. All of these aspects would have an impact on the actual maturation process, and then over time, really, the production volumes that people started looking at, you realize that it needed to be racking. And what we have is, again, we've gone for these buildings that are kind of controlled. There's lots of whiskey in them, so they tend to have that same sort of atmosphere. So there's not a huge difference between the two. When you see a big difference, and this is our personal opinion in the company, is when you go to what we would call palletized warehousing. So you don't have the cask on the side as you see there. You put it upright, you fill from the top, you put 6 on a pallet, you put a load of pallets, maybe 6 high, 7 high, and you put them in there. It's interesting. It's not something that we are keen to try, but many other companies are using it. And I think that's maybe one of the areas where you see a biggest change on the way that the cask works. Now, I know that the cask breathes, and I know it's going to breathe whichever way around you do, but certainly for us, having it on its side is important. So both the dunnage and the rack warehouses produce a similar sort of spirit. And there's a little bit of work that people have done over the years. They've said if you're high up in the warehouse, is that a little bit of a different maturation to if you're in the bottom two styles, and that'll have an impact as well. But a lot of the time, we're actually choosing casks when we're putting vatings together from different levels to minimize the impact of these changes as well. So, yeah, it's it will have an impact, but it's not a major one between the two.
It's not significant. Very interesting question here as well about the ABV. What ABV do we fill the casks at?
So we've been doing a little bit of work over the piece, and we're predominantly doing two. The traditional one was 63.5, and the other one that we've used is 68.5. And they do two distinctly different things. They extract different parts of the profile of flavors from the wood. So really, quite often we're putting the new fill, first fill in at 63, and then sometimes, and we only really use first and second fill casks. Sometimes we go right back in to reuse the second fill cask. We'll take it slightly higher, and that'll help us extract slightly different compounds. So you're looking at taking out more of the vanilla, the woody flavors, and then earlier some of the wood sugars and the characters like that as well. And I know we can play tunes and we can look at different things, but that's certainly the two basic ones we work on. And each has its own special aspect. And Billy likes to have a selection of both to actually have a look at, so that when he's pulling process together, he can take them that way.
Good. Question from, I'm going through the question. We answered a few. Do we have from all Luke? Do we have all our cask at GlenAllachie?
No, that's quite interesting. We retain. It was really in the old days. A lot of people used to sort of spread their casks around different warehouses, so that if there ever had been a problem with your warehouse, one of the safe things you could say is, well, I've got some product somewhere else. If you put one warehouse, you filled it completely with, say, 1990 production, and it was sitting in there and it went on fire, or you lost it for some reason, you wouldn't be able to get it back. But if you have some in this warehouse and some in this other warehouse complex, we're trying at the moment to take all of our casks back, to be fair, because we think the size of our warehouse complex and the distance between warehouses and the way you run them would allow us to do this, to have safety so that we wouldn't have to worry about any of that. And also it takes it back into our control. And what we love doing is sampling. What we love doing is looking at the cask to see how it's maturing, to see what next part of the process it needs to go into. So you can only really do that easily if you have them on your site. So yeah, over the next few years, and if you look at the model for GlenAllachie and the age profile that we have, as I said, we've got 100,000 storage spaces, or just short of that. We'll trend towards that. In a few years' time, we'll maybe end up with 60, 70,000 casks on site of our own. So it'll be predominantly our own warehousing, our own stock in the warehouse as well. I see a question about, are we jealous about the Irish because they can use other types of wood? I think there's so many great types of wood that we're allowed to use. At the moment, no.
Yeah.
We're still not finished experimenting, and there keeps coming more and more interesting characteristics and more interesting types of flavors that you can get out of these woods. So absolutely, at the moment, not. Yeah, I'm sure chestnut is a really good wood to try. I know that there was different aspects or different criteria, but I know it's been revisited recently, so I think the legislation will change, and perhaps in the future we'll get to try some. Maybe it's a bench size exercise for us so that we can do something in the future if it turns good or not.
I mean, at the moment, there's a lot of different type of oak. So legally, we have to use oak. I can't quite remember exactly how many types of oak there is, but we are experimenting with different type of white oak. So we've had some chinkapin, and I know a lot of people talk about the chinkapin. Absolutely fantastic, tighter grain than standard, I would call, American oak. So it gives something a bit more spicy. And we've done maturation in Appalachian and Spanish oak and French oak and all sorts of different oaks. So I think, we have still a lot of potential in terms of oak, even before going into different type of wood, if we were allowed to use different wood in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly true, Juliette. I think we just have so many out there that we've got to. So, and they are incredible, and it just takes time. One of the amazing things about it is just how you leave that whiskey in that oak for slightly longer, just how it matures and modifies itself and comes into, each time you go back, it's just slightly changing each of the flavors and the balances. So yeah, there's plenty for us to worry about at the moment. Let's not make it too complicated.
And I think that leads also to a question about, do we prefer tighter grain or bigger grain in the wood? I think we just like any type of oak because it gives a diversity. So tighter or not will give you a bit of different results. So I don't know what's your view on that, but
yeah, absolutely. I think that's very fair to say. I think that each individual type. I mean, the heavier, the tighter the grain, you maybe get as I say, a slightly different look on even the level of losses as well. But actually, to us, it's more important about how the wood itself reacts with the whiskey, tighter or not. It's not something that's been driven by that we're really spending a lot of time looking at the moment. So,
and I think what we want is diversity.
Yeah.
So we're a very open distillery. Give us diverse, wood finishes, type of oak and so on. Okay.
I like, I'm going to interrupt there.
Go on.
I like Gerard's question. What bottle would you recommend to invest in? And I would say the bottle that you're most likely to enjoy when you open it to drink. Because if it doesn't work as an investment, you'll have a fantastic time when you actually drink it. Because that's the important thing about whiskey. We always like to try it and drink it. It's nice that some whiskey is increasing in value, but actually what's the nicest thing is just to crack it open and just enjoy something.
Yeah. I think for me, whiskey is not whiskey until you've opened the bottle.
I do. It's good. Yeah.
So,
I like that idea. Yeah.
That's the second question about, have we actually come across any wine casks that don't complement GlenAllachie?
Well, it's interesting. Not so much GlenAllachie, but one of my colleagues will talk about that next time. And he says there's an experiment that Billy spent and did with him where it really didn't work and the wood type didn't work. We've been fortunate that because of the experience within the company, because of the number of years that the company and the people involved in the company have been making whiskey and maturing whiskey, there's really a good understanding of the direction it's going to travel. I mean, and Juliette's right. Sometimes a batch, some of the casks won't travel in that direction quite so far, but really we know that they're going to go in the general direction we want. But even if they did, we would spend a little bit of time monitoring it, and it would all be part of the experiments that we're trying to do. It would just give us more information on how our whiskey produces or how our whiskey matures and how it changes with different cask type.
Good. Right. So, I mean, I think we've answered, well, not all the questions because there was far too many. But it was a pleasure for me anyway, and sure it was the same, Richard, to have a bit of a conversation. It was certainly a pleasure for me to see the distillery again because it's been 6 weeks. I know you go from time to time, but I haven't been. So it's nice to see it again and see that it's still as clean as before. And I'm looking forward to actually go back to the office, go back to
meet
the coffee
team,
break.
Go back and see everybody. Well, no, it's fun. The distillery is looking fantastic. We're actually, ironically, taking the chance to do a little bit of tidying up of the gardens and the grass. I know it's just a grass area we've got, but because we weren't with the Spirit of Space side, we've actually spent some time just making that look really good. So actually, the grass has had some treatment. It doesn't look in tip-top condition that it would have. So it'll get there for next year.
I've heard as well you're growing something.
Oh yeah. Try and grow as much as I can. Next time I'll see what the next batch looks like, and I'll remember to send you a short clip of the next batch of growth from the garden that we've got. So we'll see what happens as well.
Looking forward to it. We're going to have to leave you now. We again, as every Thursday, we have a clap for any key workers. So it started as NHS, but it's now really applauding every key worker, which keep us going during these times. So we'll get ready for that. I'm certainly going outside clapping with my neighbors, and we hope to see you next week. So not you, Richard, but the viewers out there. We have another live event next week, and this will be tasting some single cask. So if you have more questions about finishes, wood type, maturation, it's a good opportunity for you to ask these questions. So thank you very much, everybody, for your question and for your interest. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. It was an absolute pleasure to spend some time, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just so nice. And I have to say that 1989 has just hit the mark. It's been absolutely spectacular.
Well, Slanjava.
Yes, Lange.
And see you soon.
And here's to key workers.
Good. See you. Bye. Bye-bye.